Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry
So
about
we're
that.
live. Thanks everybody who's tuning in to this is the Node.js community NAPI team meeting for July 19th, 2018. We'll start out by going through our the milestone we're currently working on. One thing I will mention though, just before we do that, probably most of the people who are in the call know that the blog post, which I just pasted the link into the chat, that blog post went out yesterday. I'm closing out one of the issues, talking about an update on the status in terms of availability on 6, 8, and 10, as well as some examples of modules that are being used and so forth. Does anybody else have any other announcements before we get started?
Nope, I'm all good.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to flip over to the milestone and I will share that. Share screen, milestones. Okay. So as mentioned, the blog post issue is closed. So the first one on the list is to creating the workshop for Node Summit. So Jim, you want to lead that one off?
Jim, I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're on mute.
All right, get me out of my office and see what happens. Okay, so the most current news is I got a tutorial up for async worker, and Gabriel, I really appreciate your feedback. I will incorporate those changes into that tutorial before Monday. I'm continuing to work on a Node pre-JIP tutorial. I cannot commit right now that I'll have that done in time, but if I do, I'll post it here also. If I do, it'll be tomorrow. If it's not there tomorrow, then it won't be there in time for Monday.
Sure. Well, thanks for all the efforts in putting those together either way. That's really good.
Sure.
I've unfortunately, my plan is this afternoon to go through them myself, so I might have a few more little bits of feedback, but hopefully I suspect they're going to be all good. So
okay, I will have time tomorrow to incorporate changes.
Excellent. Okay, because I was planning to sort of just run through them myself, so that'd be good.
Okay. Oh, very good, Michael.
I think otherwise we're pretty much set for the workshop, right? I guess one thing that Hitesh was mentioning, Arunish, is that Jason is going to be able to make it.
Yeah, Jason has kind of chimed in recently that he would be there for the workshop as well.
Okay, so yeah. I think if you could just respond, like, we had an earlier thread where we added Hitesh.
Yeah.
If you just respond to that, letting the organizers know we're going to have one more person.
Okay.
I don't think it'll matter. Like, I really, I can't imagine them saying sorry, but, since he's not actually registered day 0, it'd probably be good just to say by an FYI, he's there. And if anybody asks him, then they'll have him on the list or whatever.
Okay. Okay. I think he went ahead and did a registration, but I would just let the thread know.
Yeah, I think day 0 was booked like weeks ago, so he probably just couldn't register for that, even if he's registered for the conference. So.
Oh. Okay.
I really do not think it's an issue anyway. Like even if he just showed up, but it just doesn't hurt to send the email saying, "Hey, we've got somebody else who's going to help out too."
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think Hitesh put together the list of module owners. He sent it out to them. I guess there was some interaction on one of them, but haven't heard anything like people saying, no, don't do it. So that's good. And I think we haven't, no updates to the deck, I don't think, since we last spoke, but I don't think any are necessary either, right?
Right.
Okay. So anything else we should talk about on this front?
I don't know if we have later status on Node pre-JIP, which kind of ties into the workshop. I've got a pull request. Do we have it later here?
No,
we have pre-build. No. Anyway, I do have a pull request in on Node pre-JIP that would permit it to support both NAPI and NAN builds simultaneously. But it's not landed. I've not seen any action on it. So I'm not anticipating that will land before the Node Summit.
Sure. So if we get a question, we can just say, if somebody says, can you actually create one of those that will do both? The answer just is today, no, but there's a PR open to let that happen. And we expect it to land pretty soon. So
yeah, exactly, Michael.
Okay.
So,
Any other? Sorry, go ahead.
One question I had, I mean, obviously I've kind of missed the preparation for this, but do we know the sequence of how this is going to be rolled out, or like?
Well, you mean the workshop itself?
Yeah.
So in here is the deck we're using. So we can just take you through that quickly. Where is that?
Hey, Michael, it looks like Hitesh joined in the attendees.
Okay. So I need to promote him probably. Hold on.
Yep.
Do that before we participants. How do I get the right view to see him? Oh, there he is. Hold on. Attendees, promote. Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem.
So basically, we have the intro. We're going to each introduce ourselves. So we have slides for that. We have the thank you to everybody who's contributed. And then basically it's introduction, a little bit of short introductions to the NAPI and Node.js API, going through the tutorials. And then if people get through those, we have a list of, it's more than 24 modules that people can start to port. And we'll hand that out. And then we have a little bit of a wrap up and assessment at the end. Sorry. So, and the bottom picture shows who's talking to it. So there's the objectives of the workshop, other talks. So the reference to your talk on day 1 and my talk later on day 0 in terms of what else is there. And then we've got the motivation. So Gabriel's going through that at this particular instance. I'm doing a brief history. Gabriel's going to talk here at this instance about, Node add-on and Node add-on API, sort of what the difference is between the two of them. A little bit about Node versus NAN. Then we're going to get into the tutorials. So I don't think we think those first number of slides are going to take a huge amount of time. Most of it will be then people going through each of these tutorials.
Okay.
And then if people get through the tutorials, it's like, okay, we'll have the list of modules to port. People, if they want to port their own module, they can do that. We'll be there to work with them. Then just at the end, we just want to close with supporting resources and a short wrap up and assessment with a call to get.
Great. Yeah.
So that's basically, what we've got.
Did we get a list of attendees ahead of time, or?
I don't know that we get a list of attendees. The one thing I do know is I went and registered for day 0. When I went to register for day 0, the NAPI workshop was already sold out.
Okay.
So what that tells me is we should have 20, they basically in earlier emails were saying, can you handle, the room holds 24, but it's capped at 15 or something. So we said fine to 24. So that tells me we should have 24 people there.
Nice.
So I'm hoping that's reflective of interest in it as well. And, so the other talks, mine in the afternoon and yours in the main stage should also be well attended.
Right. And the once the presentation is done, we just break into like individually people wanting to, do their stuff, or like
it's basically you say, here are the links and they're self-directed tutorials.
Okay.
So everybody goes to one as they work through, then they can move on to the next one.
Okay.
Once they get to the end, we'll have this list of modules. We can say, here's the list. Hitesh just put some work in to classify whether they're like hard or easy or whatever.
Right.
And, so yeah, it's after the short intro, it's basically self-directed with us being there to help people out when they run into problems.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
I suspect that there will be a mix between people doing tutorials and people porting modules at some point.
Yes.
So I don't know if we can impose any kind of schedule in that sense. I think pretty much when we get to the tutorials, we should also mention the modules, because people might want to jump directly to the modules if they're a little more familiar with the topic. Right?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Basically say there's these tutorials, and when you finish those, you can move on to the modules, or you can really do it in whatever order you want.
Yeah.
So I think you're introducing that. So just remember to say that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Okay, any other questions on the workshop before we move on? No, and thanks to everybody for all the work, and Jim especially for putting that all together. I think it'll be good. We should get some good feedback for the next time as well. So,
Right.
Yeah, I'm excited to see like how many modules we end up getting converted.
Right. Okay. Before I forget, maybe we could mention one of the maintainers for Node SAS reached out to us, and Gabriel and I met with him yesterday. Just he had some questions about an API, talked a little bit about what they're doing, and he mentioned they have 10 million downloads, and they're looking at an API for sure. Possibly in the end, it sounds like maybe they might start with like enabling it for 10 as opposed to all releases, but I think that's a really good story there too.
So Node SAS actually did engage with us in the past. I don't know what happened. Their interest kind of went down. I don't know exactly if they ran into issues or they still have any outstanding issues.
They seem quite active now because basically they reached out on Twitter saying, we'd like to talk to somebody. We had like an hour chat with them. So it sounds like, they're actively working on it. They were running into problems. By the time we talked to them, they'd worked through those problems. They had things running, compiling. He had some questions that were not necessarily related to an API that we sort of talked through in terms of doing things. But my impression, and Gabriel can add to it as well, was that, they're actively working on it and figuring out which release is going to have an API support in it. Yep. They also mentioned they were quite interested because they got a ton of binaries to manage. So,
yeah.
Sorry, Gabriel, I think I cut you off.
No, you pretty much covered it. I was just going to concur briefly.
Okay. So
actually, on that note,
yep.
I also got an email back from the maintainer of Known Microtime being like, you can take us off the list because we have a PR to port the module to an API.
Well, excellent.
Yeah, I did 2 or 3 months ago.
Okay, so but they looked at it and said we already have one. Okay.
Yeah, they just said it needs to be, tested and signed off and landed.
Okay.
Well, if nothing else, then maybe that email helped remind people that they should do something, right?
I guess so.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Actually, the most common question I've gotten back from, sorry, Michael, the most common question I've gotten back from the email I sent to maintainers is, what is the story for older versions of Node?
Like the 4 or 6?
So I sent some clarifying questions to understand that, but I think it's generally 6, 8, 10, or 6 and 8. But so maybe we should have a slide just answering that up front. Maybe in your talk and Arnesh's talk also.
I definitely do in my talk have a place where the status I say, I will go over that it's backported to all of them and what the status is.
Okay, great.
Are people talking about .10 or .12?
No, I specifically asked that. I didn't get a reply to that question, but maybe it's worth also talking about the compat part of the add-on API.
Does it go down to .10?
I don't know if anyone's tested it.
No. When you're talking, 4 was the first one we ever tested or did that for.
Yeah, and when I recently backported some changes from master, I actually made changes in the backport. So like I didn't just cherry pick the commit. I actually made changes because there were some APIs that we couldn't use in 4, and I actually tested it against 4, even though 4 is like out of our scope. Right. I did test it, and I did backport those changes in such a way that it continues to work on 4. So Node add-on API as it stands, with obviously an API shipped as part of it, will build and run on Node 4.
Right.
But I don't know about lower.
I don't think we want to really. I think that's if you really I wouldn't be publicizing 4 too much, but it's good to have that in the back pocket that, well, like currently it still probably works.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think we can sort of make statements that might sound like we're supporting it.
Yeah.
But but de facto we are, I think. And I mean, I obviously it no longer benefits from the wide and varied testing that we have on the CI, but I certainly tested it locally with Node 4 and it works. So, I mean, that speaks to Linux. I don't have that kind of infrastructure at my disposal. And I know that the CI short circuits when you try with 4 because it's not supported, the job just finishes successfully immediately without running anything.
Yeah.
So, and okay, that's intentional and I understand, but we can still test locally and get a pretty good feel for whether it still works on Node 4.
Okay, so there's no like automated test collateral for that is reliably.
No. The CI, the Node.js community CI short circuits when you pick v4 from the dropdown.
It's not necessarily impossible. I'm just not sure that we want to encourage that, unless it becomes, as always, if something becomes a real the one sticking point, we might reconsider that.
Yeah, and that it would be case by case, right?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
On that front, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but there is a job in the CI now which tests every LTS like 6, 8, and 10 every night. So we did have a breakage on 6 a little while. We never shipped the release with it, but that will catch that earlier at this point, which is good. So Nicola, that's one thing you probably want to run that as part of the testing. It makes one of the steps a little bit easier.
Okay. In my working in my work to on porting some modules, I always tested against Node 4 and 5, and all worked good. So it works. Maybe it's not always, but for my case, it worked even in Node 4.
It's good to hear.
So it's basically, informal conversations we can talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Hitesh, anything more on that topic before we move on? No. Okay. So the next issue is this document guidance on adding APIs to NAPI. I saw Hitesh open the PR yesterday, I think.
Yep.
And so far, I think only really positive input. I did tag it for TSC review and sort of say at TSC it needs input because it does add some sort of policy changes in terms of who needs to sign off, but hopefully that will go through. I don't know probably nothing else to talk about on that one.
No, I don't think
just
so.
Just an idea that popped into my mind. This is informal, but usually when a PR comes in, no matter the subsystem, people who are familiar with the subsystem tend to end up being the approvers. So we already kind of de facto have what that one statement formalizes. So I think even if the TSC ends up not approving that one statement, I think we're probably still going to be good because we're going to de facto end up being the ones who decide whether the API makes it in or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's also been discussion before about like component owner type things. So I don't think it's going to be a foreign idea here.
Right.
There's even another discussion where, a crypto API went in and people wish it had more review. So I'm going to be opening something that proposes the security working group gets sign off on some of those things. So I'm fairly optimistic on that front.
Makes sense.
So SQLite adding, resolving that. Anisha couldn't make it today. I actually asked her to focus more on the documentation first because we wanted that for the summit next week. So that's what she worked on this week. She did get in the reference and property descriptors. So we'll talk about that later on. But there's no progress on this particular one. Investigate use of pre-build with an API. I don't know if Jim, if you probably haven't had any time or.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been giving priority to the issue backlog on Node Pregip and getting ready for Node Summit. But here, this is actually two separate modules, one for building and publishing, and then a separate one for installing. So I do have the build and publish module, creating an API builds and uploading them successfully. And now I'll turn my attention to the install side. And I'll do that after Node Summit.
Sounds good. Yep. Okay. Burn down the list of issues. I don't know if it's worth diving into those. I'd say is there any ones that people want to call out in particular?
No, nothing.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get back to those once we get through this milestone, through the Node Summit, but really been focused on that. So the next one is documentation push on Node add-on API. So as I mentioned, the property descriptor I just landed and object reference, so Anisha got those two done.
I'm working on functional reference.
Okay.
I think that later I finish.
Okay.
And then I need to work on object wrap and class property descriptor. I think that for the weekend, all will be ready.
Okay, excellent. So it's looking like we're doing pretty well. Just have those last ones, and then we can go back and do our final review. But I think
I just added a comment because I saw that in documentation sometimes we use all the namespace and other we use only the name of the class. So we need to take a decision.
okay.
Use always the namespace or the
Where did you
or not?
Did you put that comment into an issue?
Yeah, in these issues, I had here as a point before.
Here? No.
I just updated the side if in documentation use namespace
Right.
or
Okay.
Okay.
So why don't we just decide that now?
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, does anybody have a strong view one way or the other?
I'd go with including the namespace because it's unambiguous. V8 also has value, and so does nan.
Okay.
That sounds reasonable to me.
We use nappy value.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nappy this and nappy that.
Okay.
Should. So I'm going to say update. Does that sound right?
+1.
Okay. Any other comments or things like that?
No, just these.
Okay. So that's good. But yeah, I think we'll be, we'll be in good enough shape to say to the, people there, we're still refining the documentation because I think we still will be, even if we finish this off, people using it for the first time will give us comments and stuff, but we're pretty close to having it, good coverage, which is good. Okay, so that was what's on our list. Are there any other things we should add to our list? And I guess we should talk about what we do about the meeting next week.
Okay.
I think we can cancel the next week and then reconvene the following because there'll be either travel or people in attendance at the conference.
I think that makes sense to me. Anybody else think otherwise?
Yeah, I'll be traveling on Thursday.
Okay, so Nicola, I guess you could have a meeting on your own, but
so I think that we can meet in 2 weeks.
Okay,
Cool.
Sounds good. Any other topics or things before we call it for today?
Not here.
Okay, no. Well, great. Looking forward to seeing you guys, everybody, on Monday. And Nicola, we'll see you at the 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.